Imagine you're 32 years old. You wake up every morning and your knees just throb before your feet even hit the floor.
Oh, that's rough.
Right. Your contract is up in 6 months, and the team just drafted this 19-year-old rookie who plays your position, runs way faster than you, and, doesn't even need to ice his joints after practice. You are watching your entire livelihood just slip away.
Yeah, the pressure there is immense.
And then the team doctor pulls you aside into a quiet office. They don't hand you a needle and tell you to cheat. They offer you hormonal support to manage your recovery so your career doesn't end. What do you do in that room?
That is the ultimate question.
It really is.
Okay.
Let's unpack this. Today we are taking a deep dive into an educational module called Factors Contributing to Risky Nutritional Behavior. And we're really going beyond that tired stereotype of the villainous cheating athlete.
Exactly. We're looking at the architecture of compromise.
Yes. We want to understand why ordinary people under extraordinary pressure make unthinkable compromises. And, crucially, what that teaches you about your own decision-making when the stakes are high.
Right. And the foundation we are building on today is rooted in what researchers call a food-first philosophy.
Food first. Got it.
Yeah, it's the baseline ideal that elite performance should naturally come from a holistic approach to diet, rest, and well-being. But the research quickly pivots to a broader psychosocial perspective.
Because that ideal shatters pretty often in the real world.
It does. We are analyzing doping not as a simple moral failing, but as the final domino in a long sequence of intersecting vulnerabilities. It's the end result of all these internal fears and external coercions that slowly box an athlete into a corner.
Until crossing the line just feels like survival.
Precisely.
So to understand how someone gets boxed into that corner, we have a look at the catalyst.
Right.
Because nobody just wakes up on a random Tuesday and decides to risk everything on a banned substance for fun.
Right, there's always a trigger.
And the research points to a very specific, earth-shattering event, which is the performance slump. But a slump feels totally different depending on where you are in your career. Like if you're a rookie, a slump probably just triggers imposter syndrome.
Yeah, you just feel like you don't belong at that level.
Exactly. You miss a few shots and panic. But if you're a veteran...
Oh, the veteran phase is where the slump mutates into an absolute existential threat. You aren't wrestling with imposter syndrome anymore. You are terrified of your own biology.
Because the clock is ticking.
Right. A sustained period of underperformance late in a career triggers this massive fear of aging and the very real anxiety of being permanently replaced.
And what about the athletes in the middle?
Well, sandwiched between those two extremes is the mid-career slump, and that creates a profound cognitive dissonance. This is an athlete in their physical prime who is doing everything perfectly: the training, the diet, the sleep.
But they're just stagnating.
Yes, the fundamental equation of their life, which is that hard work equals improvement, suddenly stops working. It's agonizing because they have no variables left to tweak.
And this ties directly into a psychological mechanism the source calls identity foreclosure. I want to try and put this in terms that anyone listening can instantly relate to.
I'd love to hear it.
So what does this mean for the rest of us? It's kind of like a software developer whose code suddenly stops working, and their whole self-worth is tied up in being the genius coder of the office.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. If that one pillar of their identity is threatened, the brain goes into panic mode. They might start stealing code just to keep the title. Because for these athletes, if their entire self-worth is fused to being the fastest or the strongest, a slump isn't just a bad day at work.
No, it's the death of their identity.
Exactly. And the shame shifts their thinking from, is this ethical, to, will this work quickly?
And that desperation introduces something called risk discounting.
Risk discounting, what exactly is that?
Well, when human beings face an immediate catastrophic threat to their identity, our temporal focus violently narrows. We become trapped entirely in the present moment.
So the future just sort of vanishes.
Essentially, yes. The athlete looking at the end of their career is agonizing over losing their contract today. So the distant fear of long-term health consequences or an anti-doping sanction 3 years from now.
It just doesn't even register.
Right. The future consequences are heavily discounted because the present anxiety is just deafening.
If you're listening right now, you've probably done a mild version of this yourself. Have you ever stayed up until 3 in the morning, binge watching a show, completely discounting how miserable you'll feel at work the next day?
I think we all have.
Yeah, just to avoid the immediate anxiety of turning off the screen. Now, multiply that exact same narrowing of focus by $1 million contract.
Yeah.
You can see how the foundation cracks.
Absolutely.
But even with everything collapsing, There's a massive internal hurdle here. Most of these athletes view themselves as inherently good people who respect the spirit of sport.
They do.
So how do they cross the line without feeling like the villain?
They use cognitive distortions, specifically mechanisms of moral disengagement. It's the mental gymnastics required to deactivate your internal ethical controls.
So they don't get crushed by guilt?
Exactly. And the most common mechanism here is euphemistic labeling. They sanitize the act. Instead of calling it doping, they call it optimization or medical level performance management.
Wow. So they just change the label to feel better about it. But words only go so far when you are physically injecting a prohibited chemical into your body.
Right, which brings us to another distortion.
Yeah, the health compensatory beliefs. And I really have to push back on the logic of the athlete here. Wait, here's where it gets really interesting to me. We were talking about elite athletes who know human physiology inside and out.
They absolutely do.
You're telling me they actually believe a kale smoothie and a good stretching routine can magically neutralize the cardiovascular damage of a banned steroid? That is some powerful denial.
It is. But what's fascinating here is that these beliefs aren't rational thoughts at all.
No.
No, they are psychological buffers against severe anxiety. When an athlete feels cornered, their brain needs a narrative to let them take the shortcut without shattering their self-image.
Ah, so it preserves their ego.
Exactly. The logic is, I eat clean, I sleep perfectly, so microdosing won't hurt me like it would a lazy person. It allows them to maintain the moral self-image of a disciplined competitor.
Rather than a cheater. And the source also mentions optimism bias.
Yes. The classic, it won't happen to me trap. They systematically underestimate the probability of getting caught or suffering health risks.
Okay, so the internal mental gymnastics prime the athlete. But the final push rarely happens in a vacuum. It comes from the external environment.
Comes from the locker room.
Yes. The echo chamber. Let's talk about that.
This is where horizontal peer pressure and the theory of clan behavior come into play. A teammate whispering, hey, half the team is on something, creates a false consensus effect.
Which means they suddenly think everyone is doing it.
Right. It inflates the perceived descriptive norm. And what's crucial is that peer pressure in sports rarely looks like a threat. It looks like solidarity.
Oh, like we're in this together.
Exactly. It's framed as shared survival. We have to do this to compensate for other teams having more money or better facilities.
It sounds a lot like toxic corporate culture, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone in your office is working 80-hour weeks on Adderall, suddenly doing the same thing just feels like surviving.
We're being a team player.
Right. Rather than crossing a dangerous boundary, it's the slow normalization of the extreme.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights how incrementalism works. The boundary erosion starts with minor, unhealthy lifestyle behaviors.
Like what? What's the first step?
Well, think about disrupted sleep from partying or gaming. That leads to heavy energy drink use.
Which normalizes relying on a stimulant.
Exactly. And from there, it morphs into using over-the-counter painkillers to push through training. The mindset becomes that discomfort must be chemically overridden.
Yeah, you just swallow a handful of ibuprofen to get through a scrimmage.
Right. And then legal supplements become the gateway. The ritual of taking pills and powders for marginal gains is already established.
So stepping over the line to a prohibited substance is physically identical to what they've been doing for years.
It drastically lowers the psychological barrier.
Wow. Okay, so we've looked at self-justification and peer influence. But the ultimate validation comes from above.
The authority trap.
Yes. What happens when the people paid to protect an athlete's health are the ones handing them the syringe? Let's get into athlete support personnel.
Right, the ASP. This is the entourage coaches, team doctors who hold immense structural power over contracts, playing time, and injury clearance.
They hold all the cards.
They do. And this leads to the medicalization of doping. Doctors frame banned substances as necessary hormonal support or clinical recovery tools.
Which totally confuses the athlete's ethical compass.
Completely. And the specific tactic they use is called displacement of responsibility. The source gives an example where a doctor essentially says, you trust me, I carry the weight.
I have to ask, isn't that just absolving the athlete of their sins before they even commit them?
How do you mean?
Like when the doctor says, I'll carry the weight, they're weaponizing the athlete's trust to make the bad decision for them. It feels like we're letting the athlete off the hook.
This raises an important question about autonomy. And you're right, it strips the athlete of moral agency. But we have to look at how ASPs thwart that autonomy.
by threatening their career.
Exactly. They imply that refusing this medical help means you won't recover fast enough and you'll disappear from the roster.
Oh, wow.
So it turns a health choice into an existential career ultimatum. It goes from an ethical violation to simple compliance with excellent advice.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
It really shows how doping is a consequence of intersecting vulnerabilities.
It's never just a simple rule-breaking scenario.
No, it really isn't. And I think that brings us to the core takeaway for everyone listening today. Because we all face performance slumps in our careers, or our relationships, or our personal goals.
We all have that capacity for moral disengagement.
Exactly. When you are desperate, or when your peers normalize bad habits, those boundaries blur. The Force talks about the spirit of sport, honesty, courage, finding joy in the effort.
And that translates perfectly to everyday life.
Right. It's the spirit of a well-lived life. Reconnecting with your intrinsic motivations why you do what you do is the best shield against external pressure.
Because if you rely purely on outcome-oriented goals, you become incredibly vulnerable to taking those ethical shortcuts.
So true. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question, something to really mull over that builds on what we discussed today.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Consider us the fans. If athletes are being crushed by this incredible psychosocial pressure to optimize and survive, does our relentless demand for constant record-breaking make us complicit?
It's a heavy thought.
It is. Does our expectation for superhuman entertainment create the very environment that forces them to cross the line?
We demand the impossible, and then we're shocked when they use impossible means to achieve it.
Exactly. Something to mull over next time you turn on a game. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.